Hello, my name is Jenna Goddard, and I'm the Writing Center Coordinator at Thompson University, where I also teach student success courses. Today, I'm going to talk about time management for undergraduate and graduate students. I'd first like to acknowledge that Thompson University is located on the traditional lands of the Tecumloops Tishikwetmik within Secwepemcúlecw. I also like to start off with a little self-introduction. So again, my name is Jenna Goddard. I've been teaching at TRU for about 12 years now, and I love anything to do with the outdoors, particularly mountain biking and mountaineering. So today, I'm going to start off by sharing some of the academic supports available to students when it comes to time management. Then I will touch on the biggest challenges for university students in general. And then I'll talk about tracking your time, prioritization, creating a schedule, and dealing with procrastination. There are various supports available to you when it comes to time management. For example, you can book an appointment with a counselor because they offer academic counseling. You can book an appointment with a peer academic coach, and if you've never heard of that before, I'm going to chat a little bit more about them on the next slide. You can be connected with Early Alert. You can take Student Success 1030, a little plug for my own course. You can get connected with accessibility services, and you can be connected with supplemental learning as well. Peer academic coaches are supplemental learning leaders who will meet with you one-on-one in order to discuss, how to approach things like taking tests or studying or note-taking or any of those things associated with being a university student. And a lot of students come to university without actually ever learning how to study. And then they feel a little bit overwhelmed with all the assignments and all the tests. So if this sounds a bit familiar, contact the Writing Center and you can learn a little bit more about peer academic coaches and how to book an appointment. So I did a little bit of research into the biggest challenges for students in post-secondary institutions. And some of these were surprising and some of them were not. The first one did surprise me, so a lack of motivation. But apparently students come to university and then get a little bit distracted with all of the other elements of being a student. The second one didn't really surprise me, so feeling isolated or feeling like there's a lack of support. And I think it's really common, especially in first year, where you're walking around thinking, everybody else has their stuff together and I don't. But everybody's feeling this way. Everyone feels scared and like they're going to drop the ball, so there are supports for you. The third one also didn't surprise me because, again, people feel quite vulnerable when it comes to academic writing. It's kind of this big, scary thing that you need to tackle. So you can certainly book an appointment with a Writing Center tutor to get help with that. The next one is time management, which of course I'm talking about today. And then the last one, the research suggested, was the stress of uncertainty of attrition. So, am I going to graduate? And then what's going to happen after I graduate? I want you to take a minute and think, is there anything missing from this list when it comes to your own stressors? Maybe it's finances, maybe it's, juggling a part-time job or juggling a family. So think about what might be some challenges for you. So I'm going to break down time management into a few different steps. We'll first talk about tracking your time. We'll talk about to-do lists. Third, we'll talk about creating schedules. And finally, we'll talk about procrastination. So I always encourage my students in STSS 1030 to first estimate how long they spend, doing things like studying or exercising or relaxing in a given week. And then I actually ask them to track it. Overwhelmingly, they find that they overestimate the time that they spend doing things like studying or going to classes, and they underestimate how much time they actually spend on social media or watching Netflix. So I really encourage you to both estimate how much time you think you spend doing these things and then actually track it, because once you track it, you'll have more knowledge around your own, be able to eliminate them a little bit more effectively. Okay, so if you're like me, You love making to-do lists. The first thing on my to-do list is always make a to-do list, and then I check it off and I feel like super accomplished. But I encourage students to first brainstorm everything they need to do, not just what they need to do for school. Then estimate the time that they will take. And again, if you've tracked your time, then you have a lot more of an understanding around how long things actually take. Because students will think, oh, I can write this essay in 3 hours, and then it takes, 3 days. So again, if you track your time, you'll be able to estimate your time a little bit more effectively. Third, prioritization. So prioritize based on A, when it needs to be done, and B, how important it is. And I'll talk about something that will help you with this on the next slide. I encourage students to make their to-do lists at night. So if you're that person that, you get into bed, you're like, oh, I'm going to get my 8 hours of sleep and I'm going to be super awake and fresh tomorrow. And then you close your eyes and you start to think about all the things that you need to do, and your brain starts to go, and you start thinking about all the people you've disappointed in your life. No, that's just me? Okay. Well, anyway, if you make your to-do list at night, it actually sends your brain a message that I recognize I have these things that I need to do, and I'm going to take care of them tomorrow. When you get up the next day, you can revise your to-do list because that'll help motivate you to start your day. There are so many web-based tools out there to save time, so I'm not going to compile a list of them because a quick Google search can bring up a big list for you. So it's about finding what works for you. What works for you is not going to be what works for me. So again, kind of acknowledge what your own time wasters are, acknowledge what kind of systems work well for you, and then use those. Oh, I really like this. So if you are somebody who likes visuals, you might find the priority matrix useful. Wow, that's tough to say with braces. Priority matrix. So you can see really quickly and easily what you have to do and when you have to do it. So you'll see here in quadrant 1, things that are urgent and important. So for example, maybe you have a test in 2 days. So you need to study now, and it's pretty important for your academic success. Over here in quadrant 2, so not urgent, but still important. So that might be, an essay that's coming up in 2 weeks. So you're going to start thinking about it, even if you're not working on it right now. Quadrant 3, I had a student who said showering goes in quadrant 3, and I was like, all right. So maybe not showering, but things that you can delegate to somebody else. So it could be, grocery shopping. So you might be able to enlist the help of a friend or a parent or a roommate, because it's kind of important that you eat, but you might not be the person who needs to get the groceries. And finally, quadrant 4. I'm going to break it to you. Netflix and social media always goes in quadrant 4, and you can't ever put them in any other quadrant. So these are the things that you can definitely put after all the other things you need to do. Okay. Number 3 is creating a life schedule. And I say a life schedule because it's important to include all elements of your life on your schedule, not just the academic ones. And I assign this actually as an assignment in my 1030 class. And students sometimes come to me and say, oh my God, it was horrible, and I cried, and I'm so overwhelmed. And I'm like, that's totally the point. Okay, that is not the point. Because those same students at the end of the semester come back to me and say, listen, I found it a little bit overwhelming and stressful at first when I saw everything I needed to do, but I stayed on top of everything and I had a successful semester. And that is a legit quote from all of my students. So again, it's about finding the kind of schedule that works for you. If you are the kind of person who likes to have, a physical agenda that you carry around in your bag, then go grab one from the student union. Or you might want to get a big whiteboard calendar and have it next to your desk, and those are available at the bookstore. You might be the kind of person who just wants to have reminders on your phone, so use your calendar on your phone or your computer. I prefer the trifecta, that is a whiteboard calendar and my phone beeping at me and my computer sending me messages so that I stay on top of my entire life. So again, get in the habit of including everything. So not just assignments, but also, if you have a part-time job, put your work schedule in, or put in any meetings that you have or any extracurriculars so that you won't forget anything. Use color consistently, and that will help you, get a sense of what's coming up when you just quickly glance at your calendar. So for example, if you have all your due dates in, red, and you see something red, you're like, oh, due date, got to take care of that. Refer to it and update it daily. Don't create a schedule for the entire semester and then not look at it at all over the semester. It's not going to be useful. So you might feel a little bit overwhelmed when you see everything that you need to do, but you will have a lot more control over your time, and you won't have that panicky feeling where you roll into class and you're like, there's a test and I totally forgot about it. I love talking about procrastination. I find it fascinating because it's something that, universally is recognized as not good for us, but so many people do it. And the first step, it might seem like common sense, but telling yourself that you're not going to procrastinate is actually the first step. So again, it's you sending your brain a conscious message. The second step sometimes involves failing or involves, dropping the ball on something. So discovering the cost refers to, maybe you procrastinated from studying and you didn't get a great mark. But what it does is that it motivates you to change so that you won't repeat that in the future. The third one is maybe the most important one. So breaking things down into doable steps. And again, as university students, whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, you tend to feel overwhelmed with all the things that you need to accomplish. So you might find that making a to-do list for a certain day, or even if you're feeling really stressed, okay, what can I take care of in the next, 2 hours or even the next 10 minutes, depending on your stress levels. But if you break it down, it seems a lot more manageable. Finally, it's important to discover what kind of procrastinator you are, because there are different kinds. So you might be someone who's a dreamer, and these are people who are really good at making those long-term plans, but then fail to take the immediate steps necessary to get to those long-term goals. If you are a worrier or a crisis maker, then you get caught up in that loop of negative thinking, like, what if I don't do well on this assignment? Or what if I let down my group mates? Or what if I let down my instructor? And then it actually becomes quite paralyzing, and you start to worry more than you actually accomplish anything. If you are a defier, you just don't want to be told what to do. You've got like this inner core of stubbornness and defiance where, your prof says, hey, this thing's due next week. And you're like, you just told me to do something. I don't want to do it. So recognize if you have that inner core of defiance. You might be an overdoer or an overgiver. These are people who often like to please people and they don't want to say no. So then they take on too much and then can't accomplish everything. Or finally, you might be a perfectionist. And this one's so interesting because sometimes we associate a positive connotation with perfectionism when really it's not sustainable. Being a perfectionist means the quality of your work is like awesome, but it means that you spend way too much time. And again, as a busy university student, you don't have that time. So you need to be good with good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and share a few tools that you might find useful when it comes to time management. Okay, number one, pick your work environment. Probably at this point, you recognize where you work best. And people usually fall into one of two categories. Category one, those are the people who need to work in a cone of silence. They find background noise really distracting. So if you fall into that category, don't work with a study group. Don't work at a Starbucks. Instead, maybe work in a library, work at home, don't have the TV on, don't have music on. If you fall into category two, where you find silence actually distracting and you need a little bit of background noise, then again, pick your work environment accordingly, and you can work in the library or you can work with a study group. I would still caution you to not have the TV on and not have music with lyrics on. I always have students who say, I can totally concentrate with music with lyrics. And actually, I don't think you can, because even if it's unconscious, your brain is trying to make sense of the lyrics. So some students say that, classical music works for them, or actually video game music is really useful because it kind of, gets you motivated, but it doesn't have lyrics. Number two, don't multitask. And again, multitasking I think is so interesting because we often see it as a really useful tool. But most of the population can't multitask effectively. I think something like only 2% of the population can. They're called supertaskers. And they are awesome, and I wish I were one, but I am not, and probably you aren't either. So focus on one thing at a time, finish it, and then move on to the next. Point number 3, learn to say no. The older you get, the easier this becomes, I think. So recognize that you can only take on so much and then say no to the rest. Number 4, time box your tasks. So time boxing refers to setting a timer and giving yourself a certain amount of time to work on a specific task. So maybe you say, oh, I'm going to work on this essay for 1 hour. You're going to set a timer, and then you're going to stop when that timer goes off. And it's useful for a couple of reasons. One, it often stops you from procrastinating from actually getting started because you have a little bit of pressure with the timer going. And 2, it actually starts to make you work more efficiently because, again, with the pressure of time, you tend to not get distracted as often and you work a lot more efficiently. Group similar kinds of tasks. So if you have a couple essays to write or a couple articles to tackle, if you have a few projects to work on the same kind of task together because your brain will actually find that easier. It's harder on your brain to jump from one thing to another. Next is eliminate your time wasters. And again, since you're all going to go home and start tracking your time for the next week, you'll be very aware of what those time wasters are. The next one is find an accountability partner. This one's useful, particularly because we find it easier to let ourselves down than we find it easy to let others down. So, you can say, oh, I'm going to study for the next 2 hours and then get distracted within 10 minutes. But if you tell somebody that you're planning on studying for the next 2 hours, like a roommate or your partner or maybe a parent, and then you tell them that if you see me doing anything else, then, remind me I'm supposed to be studying. That's helpful for a lot of students. Decrease your distractions. So it's probably not surprising, but most students' biggest distraction is their phone. So even if you turn it to vibrate, it's still going to distract you because once again, you're focusing on, studying or writing your essay, and then your phone buzzes. So you look down at your phone. Every time you take your brain away from the task at hand, it works less effectively. So I would say, turn your phone off, put it in another room. A lot of students feel really uncomfortable with these suggestions, but just embrace it. I'm going to end with this quote that I really like. Look upon time management as a vehicle that can take you from wherever you are today to wherever you want to be in the future. Time management skills are not just skills that are going to help you as a student, they're going to help you for your entire life. Thanks for watching this presentation, and feel free to check out my other videos on writing and studying.